What we always try to do is to make a case that incarceration is something that almost anybody can be exposed to. You know, it's not a function of it's only for evil, bad people who are immoral, but, you know, nice people get in trouble too. And very often, you know, what an evening that starts out very, very nicely and innocently turns south very quickly. And then lots of lives are impacted, you know, negatively as a result. And, you know, I can just say personally, and my guess is that everybody here tonight who's been to prison, you always get this feeling that, you know, it's so tenuous, your freedom, and that at any moment, the wrong situation could occur, or you could look at the wrong person the wrong way, or piss off the wrong cop. And then they run, you know, your license, your ID, and then they discover you have a record. And then just things just get worse and worse and worse, and you're back in trouble again. And it's just, it's your freedom is so tenuous.
I was peeing my pants the first traffic ticket I got getting out of prison. I was like, oh, this is it. I'm going back.
Every time I travel and I hand my ID to the TSA guy, I'm waiting for someone to say, oh, excuse me, could you come here, please? You know, it's just something I don't think I'll ever escape.
Sorry. Yep.
But what I try to do is I try to sort of create a scenario that everyone could relate to, that someone got in trouble and ended up being incarcerated. And something that happened is just not that far-fetched a thing. It's something that could happen to almost anybody. And I've talked about this before, but it's something, honestly, I'm sort of haunted by. And it's about a guy who used to work with us. I don't want to mention his name. I'm going to call him Sam just for the sake of the story, but this is a true story. And it happened to Sam. And let's see, you know, for those people who are listening, if you can relate to this. But first, I'm going to ask you to join me in an exercise that we do every week. And if you haven't done it before, just trust me. And if you don't trust me,
do it anyway.
I understand. What have I ever done wrong? But trust me here, and please just close your eyes for a moment or two. Keep your eyes closed, and then just take a deep breath. Just slowly inhale, and then slowly let out your breath. You know, I want you just to have an expansive, open mind where your imagination can sort of go where it wants to go. So this is the story about Sam, who again worked for us. He came from really the most all-American family you could imagine. It was like a Norman Rockwell painting. He was this good-looking young guy. He was in very good shape. He had this, you know, he smiled. You know, he had this family that was very, very loving. When Sam was in college, that's when this incident occurred. And, you know, some of you have been to college. Some of you have kids who have been to college or are in college right now, so perhaps you'll be able to relate. But one night in college, Sam was out with a bunch of his friends. I think it was a weekend night, actually. And like college kids did, they, you know, hit a few bars for the evening. And Sam was like, you know, driving, he had an SUV, so he was driving around a car full of his buddies. Sam was never a big drinker. Tonight, he didn't drink that much, but he had a few beers and it was on an empty stomach. So Sam, who was never a big drinker, he was feeling a bit buzzed, you know? He wasn't falling over, but still, he was buzzed, for sure. And they're driving from one bar to another, and they're listening to the music is being played loud, and his cell phone is buzzing, and his friends are all talking loudly in the back seat, you know, you can imagine. And then all of a sudden, they felt this like bump in the car, like the car hit something. And Sam immediately slammed on his brakes. And he said that moment, when he put on his brakes, is a moment he'll never forget in his life. And at that moment, that second or two, he said it was surreal because it felt like it was an hour. The bump that they all felt, that Sam felt and the rest of his friends in his SUV felt, was the sound of Sam smacking into somebody and actually running him over. And to make the irony, or to make the situation even worse, it turned out that the person that Sam had hit and run over was his best friend in college, as it turned out. And it turned out that Sam had just killed him. Sam, when he describes it, he goes, everything that happened next was a blur. The cops, of course, came quickly, and he submitted to a breathalyzer test, and the breathalyzer test showed that he was over the legal alcohol blood level limit, not wildly over, but still he was over it. So of course they put him into handcuffs, they threw him in the car, and they took him to the police precinct. Sam's family, did right by him. They hired good lawyers. They were able to afford it. And some would say perhaps he got off easy when he received his sentence. He received a sentence of 5 years in a medium security prison. But to say his sentence was 5 years just isn't at all accurate. Sam told me that every night since that fateful evening when he ran over his friend, he's been awoken by nightmares that brought him back to that evening in college. And that every day he wakes up with this feeling of shame and regret and remorse for what he did, which is only made worse because he knows there's nothing he can do to bring back his friend or change what happened. So he spends his life to this day punishing himself more than any prison possibly could. And he doesn't feel he doesn't deserve that. He feels that that's exactly what he should be going through. He feels that overcome with guilt and shame. And I just want to reiterate, Sam wasn't and isn't a bad guy. He's not an immoral guy at all. He's not a serial killer. And in fact, he hasn't had a drop to drink in the 15 years since this all occurred. But if you met him, all you'd have to do was to look in his eyes and to see the sadness and the shame that all happened that one night as a college kid when he had a few too many beers. And, honestly, I look at him and I said, that sure as hell could have been me. I've been in that situation. And pretty much everybody I know has been in that situation. One too many beers, one too many shots of tequila, one too many glasses of Pinot Grigio, particularly when we're young. Kids do stupid things. We all do stupid things. Kids do them. And generally, the repercussions aren't so bad. But in Sam's case, it absolutely destroyed his life and that of his family. And it destroyed, obviously, the life of his friend and his friend's family as well. In my experience, most of the people that I met in prison and through the work that I and Divine and Seth do, the people we deal with, they're not evil, they're not immoral. Maybe they're people who, when they were young, they made a stupid mistake that they regret, or they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's something anybody could have gone through, there but for the grace of God. And that's a story that haunts me to this day. So I apologize, if I bring it up, but it's just something that I just can't get out of my mind. Please open your eyes and please maybe just thank God that you haven't gone through that. And thank God that your kids haven't gone through that and never will. For Sam, like me, like Seth, like our guest, like Divine, who've done time, and many people in our audience, we've been in prison, and we used to look forward to that one time a day that for an hour or two, maybe, they would let us out onto the yard. Every prison has a yard. And the yard is a place where you can take a walk, with your thoughts, or toss around a football, or shoot some hoops, or work out on the weight pile. And mostly it's a time and a place where you can meet up with your friends that you've made here in prison and laugh and argue and share funny stories and excuse me, share tragic stories and news from home. And just for a few moments, you could actually make believe or even forget that night when you had one beer too many and you ended up killing your friend. So welcome to the yard. There's somebody on the yard that I'd like you all to meet. His name, excuse me, is Emiliano Lopez. Emiliano is in LA now, where he's from. Emiliano received a 15-year to life sentence, coincidentally for vehicular manslaughter. After 12 years, excuse me, he was released from prison, and he was released under what's called supervised release, which is, depending if it's state or federal, that's either probation or parole. And when you're on supervised release, there's a probation or parole officer who's sort of responsible for watching what you're doing and making sure you're not getting into trouble. My probation officer was a reasonable woman. She never really bothered me much, but Emiliano didn't have that experience, and he'll tell us about that. He had a bad experience with his officer. Most people would bitch and moan and complain about that, but for Emiliano, that was just not enough. First of all, he was savvy enough with social media, so he began reaching out to other returning citizens to find out if they had experience with this parole officer and what had happened with them. And when they responded, he realized he had hit upon something. Why not build a mobile app that enables users to learn about, the collective group experience of these people who have, really total control over your life for a year or two or three, and share that experience and rate and rank them so people know what they're dealing with and how to best deal with it. Now people could actually voice their experience and not just sit there and have to take it on the chin, and hold these people who have godlike power over them, hold them accountable for how they handle their clients. Emiliano is also an accomplished artist. He taught himself how to code. He worked for a while at Defy Ventures, a prominent nonprofit in the reentry space where I also worked, and where Seth actually went through the program himself. He worked at the Amity Foundation, which helps returning citizens find housing. And now he's at the GRIP Training Institute, where they have a one-year restorative justice program that helps people who are criminal justice impacted. It helps them understand themselves, their motivations, and trains them how to lead happier, productive lives. So Emiliano is an activist, he's an artist, and he's an abolitionist. So Emiliano Lopez, welcome to the yard.
Welcome, brother.
Thank you so much. Good to be here. Thank you, Richard, for the warm welcome.
Yeah, you bet. I know that's a long introduction. I'm seeing if I can make the introduction eventually to be the entire show. And then we'll never have to deal with guests.
I've only been out.
Problem for you.
I've only been out like 5 years. That was the longest bio I ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, good. I'm very sort of in touch with myself. I'm very self-aware, and the truth is I love to hear myself talk. So really, that's what's going on here. No more or less. All right. So anyway, Emiliano. This is not an interview, so, anybody here is going to say whatever they want, but just to get things started, we typically want to talk a lot about your experience in prison. This was, I assume, a state situation for you versus federal?
Yeah.
Okay, and where were you taken to prison first?
The first place I went to prison was Wasco, in the Central Valley.
Okay, what kind of place was that?
That was a reception center. So they just took intakes and kind of just got to know them, monitored them to see where they would fit, and send them to an institution where they would serve out their sentence.
Okay. How long were you there?
I was there roughly 9 months. Yeah, the stay there should be relatively quick. However, I went to prison at the height of overcrowding in California. So there wasn't any bed space in the level 4 institutions where I was supposed to go. So I pretty much stayed at the reception center until my points dropped. And then I went to a level 3 prison, which wasn't really any different.
Yeah. And so that was after you were sentenced. You went to,
right.
You went to transit for 9 months. Wow.
Were you expecting a sentence that you had gotten? Were you surprised when the judge rendered the sentence?
No, because I took a plea agreement. So I pled guilty to a 15-year to life sentence.
Wow.
And
that's a pretty stiff plea agreement, right?
Yeah. I had never been in trouble to that magnitude before. So to go to court for a felony offense, especially considering what I did. I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but when I heard at the arraignment that I would be facing a life sentence, yeah, I couldn't wrap my head around that.
Really? So how much time between the time you were sentenced to you actually, were incarcerated initially? How much time went by?
It was about 8 months.
So what was that 8 months like?
Oh man, that 8 months was the longest 8 months of my life.
Yeah.
That was 8 months fueled with a roller coaster of emotions, not understanding what this system is, comparing myself to people that had committed the same crime, asking the question, why am I being arraigned or charged for such a long time? And then it was my environment, getting to know my environment, getting to know the people that were around me, with me, and then listening to them and what they were going through, and just like the confusing process that people face, when you're put in jail and just like everything out in the community just like stops, like your life is just literally like on pause, and you're waiting for someone to make a decision.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are also, asked for advice from people who are going through stuff. And I tell everybody that the time that you're waiting to actually be incarcerated, for you for 8 months, for me it was like 1.5 years, is actually the worst time that you're doing. And that if you have the opportunity, go away as quickly as you can, because you're really doing the time anyway. You may as well get credit for it. And the anticipation is always much worse than reality. You agree with that, Emiliano?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes waiting is the best thing to do. And sometimes that anticipation, you just don't know what's after that. You don't really know what'll happen. In my case, it was different. 3 weeks before trial, my charges were amended to second-degree murder, and it was either take a 15-year to life sentence with halftime credit, which I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded good, or take the murder charge and you do 15 years straight before you can even be considered to be let out. So I spoke to my attorney, and under that advice, I took the plea agreement because I wasn't going to win. There was no winning.
There was no winning.
No.
So you remember that first moment when you were brought to the assessment center or whatever it was called? Oh yeah. When you were free, before you took that one step, and then you go in the door, and now you're an inmate. Now you're incarcerated. Do you remember that moment where it all changed? Yeah, it's the moment that I left jail that I realized that things were not going to be different, because
the constraints were different. You know, I had a chain around my waist and my hands. I had leg irons on, so I knew that I was gone. I was going to go away for a while.
Huh. What was your first reaction when you got to prison?
That I just wasn't human anymore. That I was just a piece of, I was just a person. I wasn't even a person. I was just something that, I was a body labeled with an ID now.
What made you feel that way?
Well, I had no clothes anymore. So I was just standing there naked, waiting to go through the entire process of getting underwear and some pants and a smock.
How long were you standing around naked?
I would say about 2 hours. Wasn't fun, but I wasn't alone.
Yeah, company, huh? Plenty of company.
Yeah, that doesn't make it better. That makes it worse.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was like, hey, at least I'm not going through this by myself. But just the way people look at you, they don't look at you, they look through you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's a very weird,
Exchange.
very strange to see another human being look at you like you're not a human being.
Yeah, just a number. That's what they ask you
Yeah,
for.
they seen it all, man. Like they seen it like a million times over, man. Some of them guards have been there 20, 30 years, man, doing that. So like, I can figure out that the first year or two, it's like, whatever.
Yeah, you just shout out your number and you become that number.
Turn around, open your, put your lip down, put your tongue up,
Yeah.
push it around, cough, bend over, spread them.
All that.
You got the whole scenario.
Yeah.
You got it right there.
Burned into my damn memory, my emotional fucking psyche.
Like date night.
They're checking your ears and doing this.
Yeah, run through your hair, fingers through your hair and ears and all that nonsense, man.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Pretty degrading, that's for sure. So after you got processed, were you put in a cell, or were you in like a housing unit, or what kind of situation was it?
Oh yeah, I was put into a specific housing unit with people that had life sentences. It's called the Lifer Building.
Oh God. So were you scared?
Yeah, I was scared. Yeah, I had no idea what to expect. It was summer. It was May. It was May 27th. It was the weekend of Memorial Day.
Damn.
It was hot and sticky. And I went into this building that was like dank, and the lights were off, and it had no air conditioning, just a swamp cooler. So it just makes everything even worse. And then I went into this cell, and they opened the door, and I had a bunch of stuff in my hand, like a blanket, a couple change of clothes, and some underwear and a towel. And as soon as I went inside, the door closed, and that was it. I just sat there. I didn't know what to do with any of that stuff. Like,
How long did you sit there?
I don't even remember. It must have been a while.
What happened next? Did someone come over to you, or what happened?
No. Everybody was locked down. I entered a unit that was just predominantly locked down. So on the third day that I was there, they let everybody out, and I had no idea what was going on, and and then there was a riot. So.
Damn. On the third day?
On the third day.
Wow.
What happened with the riot? Can you describe that day?
Oh yeah, it was just chaos. It was chaos. And then I went into prison with a broken ankle, so I had crutches and.
Oh man.
And yeah, so I was just like.
You were vulnerable.
Yeah, totally. But I had crutches, so I wasn't totally vulnerable.
And this was your first time in prison?
Yeah, it's my first time in prison.
Oh man.
Was there a strong, racial divide there, with the Mexican guys with the Mexican guys and the black guys with the black, or how did that play out?
Yeah, my experience in prison was very racialized. Everybody stuck with their own race. And then there was even subdivisions of gangs and stuff like that that got even deeper.
But you were not part of a gang, right?
No, I wasn't part of a gang.
But you ended up gravitating to other Mexican guys?
But yeah, I was Mexican. So
Did you feel like the pressure to have to do that, or you just chose to do that?
no, there was no pressure to do anything.
You just kind of like fell in line.
I just went with the flow.
What the environment demanded, I guess.
Yeah, so I just went with the flow of, yeah, exactly what the environment demanded.
Were you concerned about, there being another riot, and that you would be thrown into it?
You know what? I don't even remember what my concerns were, because there was so much going on. I'm still trying to process everything about just going into that building.
How long have you been out?
I've been out 5 years.
And you're still—
Damn, that's not long. You've accomplished a lot, though. I got to give that to you. You accomplished a great deal in such a short time.
Emiliano, too. One of the things that you mentioned too is like there's so much going on, right? And I think there's a lot of people that haven't gone through that process that don't really understand that, because they think that you're locked down, you're just lethargic, you're doing nothing. They think that's what the prison experience is. But as you mentioned, it's actually the opposite. And it's like, it's so much overstimulation all the time.
Yeah,
for your life.
Yeah, sensory overload, absolutely.
And that is what is triggering, and all the things that are hard to process out, right? And sounds like that was your experience too.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it sensory overload. I just would call it like, there's just extremes, because I did feel these extremes of like extreme compassion. Like people would really look out for you. Like people, gave me soap, gave me things that I didn't have. Food.
So you got the care package with no strings attached.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Some people aren't so lucky.
Right, exactly. And to be in there for my first time, I was just, taking it in and like, just, okay, cool. But knowing in the back of my mind that it's like, okay, you know what, this debt's gonna have to get settled sometime. But
yeah, right, yeah.
But still, I mean, I accepted it. I knew like I had nothing. And then the other extreme was extreme violence. People like really, out to do the most harm. But I also seen that another component to the racial component is the other side, is the cops, who also perpetuate that type of division and violence and are okay with it by just like randomly opening doors and setting people up for failure.
How might they do that, in your observation?
Oh, just like if you have somebody outside of the building that's mopping, and then you have a person of a different race or anything like that, they open the door and then boom, people come out and they start fighting.
Explosion, yeah. Now they've been known to do that, man. Like really set people up and position people to. I mean, you gotta understand, like a lot of the prisons people don't realize are really ran by the inmates or the convicts, especially at high level securities, and people don't really realize that. That's one thing that the movies, when they portray that's real. Like a lot of cops are doing a lot of legal shit, whether that's against human moral code or just they're being paid off for whatever compensation they receive for that. So a lot of that's never addressed, and you never see a lot of press around guards and COs being prosecuted, arrested or prosecuted, or even investigated around that type of behavior.
Yeah, there's no investigation when the police themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like an inside world, right? Because we always talk about going home, being released as we're out in the free world. When we're locked up, we say, "Yo, what's going on in the free world?" So it's almost like it's a contained world, like a bubble, and it's just like the fucking streets. It's just a different element of the streets, right? There's They say there's better drugs in prison than there are on the streets, believe it or not, right? There's gambling going on. There's sexual activity going on. There's There's murders going on. There's like all kinds of shit going on, man.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
but at the same time, Emiliano, you talked about acts of kindness. And so this range,
There's also charity going on.
the spectrum of human potential. And I'm wondering, particularly early on, because I went through it myself. I had guys come over to me and they were just very compassionate. And, you know, people were nice to them when they came to prison initially, and they were going to just pay it forward. And at first, I didn't know what to make of it. You know, could I trust them? Because I had heard don't take favors and, you know, all that kind of stuff like that. Was it confusing? Could you sort out what were sincere acts of kindness versus being suspicious of people who had some kind of angle?
No, not really. I mean, when I was in jail, there was a lot of people that talked to me. They kind of, they had the foresight that I didn't, and you know, they told me, you know, what to expect, what to do, take things with you, barter, you know, make sure that you're not in anybody's debt, and just things like that. And it was, you know, all of those lessons just, you know, they came to fruition when I needed them to come through, and luckily I had some stuff that people gave me, and I was able to do stuff like that.
What was
one thing was that?
I was gonna ask you, what was your prison number? You remember that?
My prison number?
Yeah.
My ID?
Yeah. You know what your
Oh, yeah,
number,
yeah.
right? You was the number, right?
Yeah, BA1256.
Exactly. Seth, what was your number?
13197-111.
Richard?
Don't remember mine.
03845-070.
Yeah, that's like implanted.
It's like a
branded.
tattoo in my mind that,
Yeah.
I'll never forget.
It's crazy.
I made myself forget.
Yeah. You had a number lobotomy.
Right, yeah,
Prison number
exactly.
lobotomy.
On my second day in prison, a guard who was known to be a real prick came up to me and he said, "What's your number?" And I just didn't know my number.
Wow.
And
You gave him your phone number.
50.
And that's how they talk to you. Yo, what's your number? That's right. What's your inmate number? That's how they talk to you.
right, and
It's not Richard, Mr. Bronson.
No, there's no Mr. Bronson. And he said, "What's your number?" And I said, "I don't know." And he phoned at me for like a half an hour.
You're just fucking with him.
I don't know. It was pure intimidation on his part.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know. I just got the call. I haven't memorized it. You know, I don't know. I don't know. And it was just so arbitrary. And like, what's your purpose of doing this to me? You know?
to see you squirm.
Yeah.
He saw me squirm.
They love it. They fucking love it. Psychopaths, man.
Yeah, they're the worst.
Wow. Tanya Vargas writes, "How long is this invasive and inappropriate line of questioning going to continue? You all need to think about how triggering this conversation is for people impacted by incarceration.
Absolutely.
I thought this conversation was to uplift Emiliano's work, not to exploit his trauma for the group's entertainment. What you all are doing right now is not okay." You feel that way, Emiliano? It's not okay what we're doing?
You know, I mean, it does tap into some traumas that are real, that exist. Understanding like where it's coming from, if it's malicious, if it's meant to just to be exploitative.
You feel that that's what we're doing now?
I mean, no, not so much. I mean, I think because we were all in prison, I feel like there's a different kind of connection because we all did time. However, I do think that putting it out there like this can be taken in a way that would be triggering, especially for other impacted people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm triggered. I'll tell you this, I'm triggered every week.
For one thing, I'll tell you, like myself, do I continue to get triggered? Yeah, I got 5 years out. I'm in the community. And there was something, and I'll tell you this, that when I went to see a therapist and try to get help while I was incarcerated, I was diagnosed with adjustment disorder.
You and I both.
I couldn't adjust to prison life fast enough because people have normalized what prison is. And then coming out, doing 13 years, like my time in prison wasn't a walk in the park. Like when I went to the yard, it wasn't about, I'm gonna go to a place to relax. I was happy when I didn't go to the yard. Yeah, I was happy. Like if they didn't let me out, I was like, man, cool. Because
Honestly,
the level of violence,
I definitely want to speak to that.
because the level of violence that that existed on the yard that I was in, only a few people can say, like, man, that shit was crazy. Like I didn't even know places like that existed.
Well, let me, if I just may interrupt, because, you know, I'm very concerned that somebody would have written what they wrote, because certainly, speaking for Seth and Divine and myself and Amanda and Adrian and the rest of our team, we've devoted our life to try to help our brothers and sisters with their reentry. We devote our lives to helping people get jobs and get housing and to create community. And sometimes we devote our life for people to sort of put the past behind, to laugh at the funny things, to deal with emotions, to take ownership, to move on, and to have successful outcomes. I don't know, Tanya, I don't think she's ever been with us before, but this is what we do every week, pretty much.
I gotta speak.
I am unaware that that sentiment would have existed. And certainly it is not my goal or our goal to upset you as a guest who graciously comes on here. The last thing we want you to do is to leave and feel, you know, bad for the experience. We want just the opposite. And, you know, very often people come back and hang out with us because I think they had good experiences. So if we're making you feel uncomfortable, you know, I asked you before we started, is there anything that you really don't want to talk about? And,
right.
You know, I understanding that different people have sensitivities, you know.
Yeah.
And
yeah, when we spoke before the call, before we went live, yeah, I mean, I had no idea that you did time, or that Seth did time.
5 years.
I did time too.
Or that Divine did time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because y'all look innocent. And you guys look like
You look innocent too, man.
That's the
I don't know.
first.
I don't know something
You
about
look more
y'all.
innocent than I do. I look. That's the first I ever heard that. I wish I was innocent.
Again, now somebody is saying maybe it's good to prep the guest before we start that we're going to discuss their prison experience. That's exactly what I said in the introduction and exactly what I said to Emiliano before we let the room in, that we would do that. And that at the end, we would talk about his work like we talk about everybody's, to give them, you know, the exposure and, you know, to help them amplify the message that's important to them.
Yeah.
Richard, I gotta speak to this. I can't stay quiet. I'm sorry. I have to speak to this. I definitely understand where that person was coming from, and I see the lens that they're seeing it through. But we know, and as you said, and that we don't bring guests on here to exploit or, you know, make light of or make fun fodder of their prison experience. We've all been to prison. We all experience at some degree the brutality of prison. I, for one, suffered a post-traumatic prison disorder. You know what I mean? I, for one, had to seek out counseling and therapy. You know what I mean? So by no means is this a game, a joke, and we don't do that here. We're all about uplifting our brothers in a way that we can allow them and help them to work through, talk through, laugh through sometimes, even cry through on this podcast about their prison experience. You know what I mean? I've been out 20-something years and I still shed tears when I think about people who abandoned me. You know what I mean? Straight up and down, this is real. This is not no bullshit. This is not no game. We don't come here to play with people and none of that. You know what I'm saying? So I am a little upset. I am a little bothered by the fact that someone even would position a question like that or even a statement like that to even think remotely that we would do something like that. You know what I mean? And by no means, my brother, are we doing that to you. The same thing we're doing with you, we do with every guest on here. This is like that 30th episode.
We do with each other.
You know what I mean? We do it with each other. And it's a way that we work. Sometimes you got to laugh to work through the pain. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't have enough tears left because you cried more. You know what I mean? And that's what it is, man. So I really take offense to that, but I do understand and align with the lens that they're speaking through. But they obviously haven't been on here before, and they don't understand, you know, our position and what we stand, what we represent and stand for. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I'm not going to take away from your position about being offended by it. However, I can see and respect the lens that they see things through. Incarceration is a huge deal in this country, in California. In California, we have what? How many? Over 100,000 people are incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of them come from marginalized neighborhoods, and they're Black and brown. Throughout this country, I mean, we over incarcerate people, and then we also see like we're seeing the effects of mass incarceration. So I can see how people will look at this and that have never been on here before, and feel a certain way. You know, if they haven't been on a yard, they don't know what it's like to be on a yard. They don't know what these conversations look like. You know, it's hard for people. It's hard for people to empathize with what the yard is. Kind of hard, kind of similar to empathizing with a person that's been in war.
Yep.
Like you'll never know the smell of an after battle, what that smells like. Like you'll never know what it's like to, you know, put a bandage around your friend and watch him slowly go away, die. So yeah, I mean, I really feel what that person is saying, and I really feel like maybe a heads up to your audience before, because you never know who's coming on, and as your audience grows, you never know where these conversations may lead. And who will be on there?
One of the things that you mentioned too is the association disorder, I think is what you called it, right? Like, I mean, talk about like shock and awe, like going from outside world to inside world, right? And I think that's what's happening here, and I think that's, you know, where that comes from is like that's real. Like that shit is real. That like, I can't believe this, you know, and what the fuck, and all the things that are happening is what happens in it. And, you know, and you're right, like the yard is a lot of different things in prison. The yard is a battlefield, the yard is a playground, the yard is a joyful time, the yard is a workout facility, the yard is peaceful time sometimes, the yard is violent as hell sometimes. Like it's all those things. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like when I sat in that reception center for 9 months, man, there was the best act of kindness that somebody showed me was they gave me a book, and they gave me 2 books to choose from. One of those books was The Count of Monte Cristo, and the other book was some fantasy book.
Good book.
I chose the fantasy book first. I read 2 lines and I shot it back. I'm like, let me get the other book. And then when I read the other book, I started to feel like that, like I was in that book. I read it in like a day.
Yeah.
And there's one thing though, the best thing that I took from that book is this quote while the main character was sitting in the dungeon. And he said, for the happy man, prayer is but a jumble of words until tragedy teaches him the sublime language to which he speaks to his creator. And when you can be alone in a place and go into that in like deep within your soul, without any emotional intelligence, without knowing how to process emotion, without knowing how to speak, with the only language is violence, like then you tap into something special within yourself.
Yeah.
And that's like, these are like the moments of change.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to get to know what happens on the yard, what happens behind these closed doors, because there's such a thick iron curtain between the community and prison. And people stopped seeing prison as an extension to that community, because people come out of prison and go back into this community.
Yeah.
We're talking to Emiliano Lopez. And we've just brought someone who I don't know has been with us before. Your name is Adalia, right? Do I have that pronunciation right?
Well, that's my wife's name. This is her iPad.
Oh, hi, Adalia. Okay.
Brian.
And you
Adalia.
are,
Peace, King.
Peace.
and what's your name?
Brian.
Brian. Okay. Was it you who wanted to join the conversation, or was it Adalia?
It was me.
Okay.
I'm listening now. I'm just listening. I'm unmuted. I'm here.
But say what you need to say.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And now that you're here, if you got something to say, please don't hesitate.
All right. Appreciate it.
Okay. Have you yourself done time?
Oh, he's muted.
He's muted. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I did 12 years in the feds.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been out?
About 3 years. Yeah, I've been out about 3 years. You know, I did like 10, and then I went through all the violation, going back and forth.
Yeah,
you know,
me too.
and you know what I'm saying. Since then, since I got off of violation, I done, you know, I've been at the same job for 2 or plus years. I done got married. Yeah, no, you know, my license is straight. Everything, you know, everything's good. You know,
The
but
license is always questionable.
yeah, life is good. You know.
How do you find that your transition has been? Has it been a smooth transition? Has it been? Do you feel like, you know, you were able to overcome certain obstacles and odds that at first it wasn't, then you kind of figured it out?
I think for the most part, you just gotta, you know, you just gotta grow up, kind of. You gotta kind of differentiate yourself from prison and the past life. You just gotta, you know, you just gotta get used to just, you know, normalcy in life.
Right.
You know,
So almost kind of, is it sort of like acceptance of responsibility?
yeah, accountability.
Playing on, you know, the federal system works.
Yeah.
So it's also being humble.
Humble.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. All that. I went to the now I got the year off for the drug program one time.
RDAP.
RDAP, yeah, I got the
I
year
went
off
through
and I
that.
violated and gave it back. But yeah,
Okay.
but they teach you a lot of good stuff in there though.
Likewise, yeah.
I didn't come to see it until later on.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, life stuff for sure. Hey, Brian, are you on probation right now?
Nah, I'm done with all that.
You done with that? How was
Congratulations.
your probation officer?
Please. I ain't never done good on probation.
Because of
How
the
was your
officer or
officer, though?
because
How was your
of
officer?
your choices?
My officer, you know, I went through a couple, but all of them was kind of like, you know, for real, probation, I tell anybody, if you can pass a piss test, probation is nothing.
Yeah.
For real, if you ready to leave drugs alone, probation is nothing. I don't care what level, I don't care if it's state, feds, you know, whatever. If you can pass a piss test, probation is nothing.
So what
Well,
do you do?
I didn't actually do drugs, but I got a dirty urine for you know, handling drugs.
Yeah. If you
I
can
didn't
leave,
pass that piss test.
if you can pass a piss test, drugs is nothing.
Oh, you
You
didn't
handling it.
I couldn't handle them. I thought I just couldn't take them.
Yeah, you was handling a lot of drugs.
Wait.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Are you working now, Brian? You have a job?
I didn't say again.
You have a job now, you mentioned? You're working?
Yeah. You know, yeah.
Good. Good. You know, we do a lot with employment, and there's a direct correlation, of course, between unemployment and recidivism. Guys or people who don't get jobs almost always get rearrested. But on the other side, people who get jobs almost never, ever get in trouble again. They live happily ever after. It's that direct.
You have to be ready, but you have to be ready to work.
Yeah.
You know, like me, I've always sold drugs, you know, but at the same time, prison taught me to kind of like, you know, hustle, but stay as like a normal Joe, you know, stay and you hustle, but you stay as a Joe. You don't really, you know,
Don't go over
because they're all of us doing time. It's like money ain't nothing. I just, you know, because I can live off a honey bun, you know. But yeah,
I'm guilty.
you know.
I'm guilty of that crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure, man. Well, thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for your insights, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And congrats on getting home. and
Yeah.
everything.
You know, just join in whenever, you know, whenever you feel inspired.
I'm here.
Yeah.
How did you guys
That's
come, by the way? Because we're not familiar with your names. How'd you hear about us?
Man, you know, I walked in the house, I got off, and my wife, she told me that y'all was coming on, and she told me that she wanted to, you know, wanted me to listen in.
There you go. Welcome. Thanks.
Support
Thanks
system,
to your
very
wife.
important. Support system.
She's
very
inspired. She's inspired by my story. She just, she just thinks that I'm the, you know,
The truth.
So getting back to some of the stuff that was voiced by some of our guests, and I do appreciate the fact that if you're not familiar with what we do, and if we're laughing or joking, that could seem insensitive or inappropriate or whatever, you know, particularly if someone is going through a painful, traumatic time, you know, you don't laugh about it. That's pretty insensitive. But, you know, all of Divine, Seth and I, we've all been to prison. We've been out for a while. And we work with people, thousands of people every day who are in prison, coming out of prison, whatever. But the one thing we see, and I see it in you, Brian, is that there's a sense of humor often that's there too. And maybe it's only because you have to be able to laugh about it, because if you stop laughing, you're just going to cry. Like the way you just described it, Divine. I thought it was beautiful what you said. You know, you've run out of tears, all you're left are with, you know, I remember things that were pretty funny. You know, there were characters in prison, you know, out on the yard that, you know, just were funny people, funny situations. Do you remember funny times in prison, Emiliano, despite all the negative shit? Emiliano? Emiliano, do you hear me?
Yeah, he's muted. There you go.
There
There
we
you
go.
go.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you find a sense of normalcy after, you know, 7 years. The normal
It took you
changes.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to actually ask. How long did it take you to really like to adjust and kind of get your bearings in you know, around you being there, of course, and the time you were serving, but just the prison experience and the whole process of the whole thing?
I didn't, man. I just basically gave myself a job. I seen that there was a need, and I started learning. I started taking paralegal classes. I started reading, and then I started helping out people that couldn't speak English or read or understand what they were sentenced for.
Right.
I started advocating for them and helping them out through their proceedings, and I learned how to do a lot of stuff. And
So
you know,
education and basically advocacy and charity in that sense was a way that you kind of coped with your predicament.
pretty much.
Got it. Mine was, and let me tell you mine, same thing. Mine was reading. I did a lot of reading, was, you know, better in my mind, a lot of spirituality. Like spirituality really was what really gave me the mental and spiritual fortitude to really go through that. Because I was abandoned in prison. Everybody I thought was my friend, everybody I cared about. I had a 3-year-old son in the streets, you know, I just took it on. Like I basically decided that I can't give up. If I'm gonna give up and give up on myself, then I might as well kill myself in prison. And I wasn't gonna do that. So I said, you know what, I gotta get the fortitude in education and spirituality will help me get through my time.
What got you through yours, Seth?
I mean, I dug into the word a lot too, you know, and you know, you kind of when I think that happens with a lot of people. I was raised Christian, you know, in a Christian family, et cetera, et cetera. I just went pretty far away from kind of like those principles for a long time, and I just kind of started to get back into it about 2 years before I went to prison. So, but when I got to prison, you know, prison sucks, but there are a lot of blessings, right, that come out of that. And I met some great friends. I mean, you know, you guys, I love you guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
bro.
You know, it's like there's a bond that, you know, that happens. And that's one thing that is hard to explain. And I think kind of what we're trying to get at in this episode specifically is, you know, that bond that's created. We're like, oh, okay, like we know what's up. You know what I mean? Like we've been through the shit, you know, and like all the things that happen and don't you know, and go on and process and all the shit, and it's not easy for sure, but processing it is important. And so anyways, that's a long way to say, yeah, spirituality was a big thing for me as well, and getting kind of a, I guess pun intended, a little bit North Star, right? And just going, okay, what am I, what can I be grounded to, that I'm good with. And, I think that's why a lot of people go to prison and find, a belief in a higher power, universe, call it God,
Right.
whatever you want to call it, right? Like
Right,
they you're kind of forced to look, you're forced to look, like Emiliano said earlier, deep inside yourself. And then also that kind of exposes what's happening, in other realms or whatever you want to call it, right? Like you're like, oh, hey, what about this? And what if that is? And I think that's a blessing. I think that's one of the greatest things, that I'm thankful for prison, was the time to just go and kind of learn about myself, learn about,
right.
what I believe is my creator, and learn about other things that I wouldn't have had time to do, had I not gone through that. So, but yeah, long answer to your question.
What about you, Brian? What got you through it?
I don't know what got me through it. I just, like I said, man, God got me through it.
Yeah.
For real. Really, it was like, I'm here now, and I just, for real, I just listened to people. I just listened to other people's struggles. And
Yeah.
I was like, he been here for 6 years. He's still living. I can make it.
Yeah.
He got life. He's still here. I can make it. Like kind of like it could be worse. It could get worse. It could always be worse.
Yeah. What about you,
Lost
Richard?
friends, lost family, all that. So
yeah.
I just wanted to welcome Kimberly. This is her first time here. Emiliano invited her, and she works with folks
Wow.
in Sing Sing. So good for you, Kimberly, for the work you do, and thank you for joining us. As every time I ask a question, I fear that it's going to be turned on me.
I know.
So be careful what you ask for.
Exactly.
And as soon as I asked Emiliano, I go, oh, shit, I hope nobody asks me that. What got me through it, well, playing guitar definitely got me through it.
Yeah.
He's in the band room.
Right. So I played a lot of guitar, so that was good. But really coming to understand how my ego and my lack of humility always got me into trouble. And, and coming to terms with that. And there's just something that's very, very rehabilitative and redemptive about scrubbing like 100 urinals a day.
Good, I can imagine.
And when that's your job, it's very hard to think of yourself as being a big shot, because
the porcelain throne.
I was a big shot before I went to prison. And, and I thought, well, the rules don't apply to me. And the rules of nature and of man and of humanity apply to everybody, including me, particularly me. And I really had to confront, the lies in my life that I had taught myself and what I wanted to be as a man, and I came out of prison, I was homeless and I was destitute. And, I was a guy who before in prison, I was taking private planes and leading a very different life. So I felt like it was almost karmic what I was going through, and that my job was just to sit back and watch it and just take it in. So for me, it was an answer, as I'm answering this question, it was the opportunity to really be an honest observer to my own life is what got me through it.
Good way to put it.
I think prison,
for real. Like I went through a time in prison where I grown to hate my old self.
Yeah.
Like I had to grow to I had to learn to hate the old Brian, because the old Brian, like, you can't win like that. You was too selfish. You was too stuck on money. You was too stuck on self.
Yeah.
You wasn't really showing. You was showing love, but you was showing like street love, like what people, like how you was shown love, like through the hard times. But like, that's not really love. That's not grown man love. That's street. That's street code. Like, you get out, I'm gonna give you some dope. You get out, I'm gonna get you some shoes. I'm gonna take you through the hood, and you know, I'm gonna bless you, but I ain't gonna like really, I can't give you a job. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't give you nothing life changing. Only thing I can do is keep the doors to prison open. That ain't love.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, man. And that brings up something too, man. We talk a lot about on the yard, like that you mentioned that old dying to that old person, right? Like there's a spark, right, that starts that, right? And Emiliano, you mentioned like, you know, the Count of Monte Cristo, right? Like when you first got in, and it was that your spark to like start change? And I assume you went through the process that Brian's talking about too, and like going, okay, that, you know, I'm changing things are going to be different, you know, et cetera. Can you kind of pinpoint that to that point, or was it something else?
No, I just got into prison. I couldn't even identify change.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what change looked like. I didn't even know what I needed to change.
Yeah.
You know, like I spent about 4.5 years locked down on and off. Like my time was spent just like reading. And then when I finally was able to go to like a minimum security prison, and I started to get to know, you know, I started to see programs.
Yeah.
I started to see people go home. That's when the change happened. So the organization I work for is the Grip Training Institute, and I participated in that program, and that's a 52-week program that guided me on this journey to look within, to really understand like the root of the trauma and how that trauma was manifested in misbehavior and then medicated by alcohol until I was at this point in that room with a bunch of people, understanding, damn, like this was the journey that led to this place. And you know, it was a series of writing letters to people that I have harmed, to myself for hurting myself, for giving myself a hard time, for being really hard on myself.
Yeah.
And then ultimately making peace with everything that can't be undone.
Right.
And now like my sole purpose is to make sure that things like that don't happen to people.
Things like what?
Things like these divisive attitudes where people have to feel like it's me against the world. And I don't know if that has ever been said while you were on the yard, or how people have felt, because when you're up against a system, you feel like the entire world is against you. When you're in court, it's the United States of America versus you. Yeah, it's California versus you.
Yeah, it's tough game to win.
So yeah, so exactly. So when you feel like that, so this divisiveness, that's what has to stop, because there is no community if everybody's divided. So when you go to court, you know, you know what? I committed a crime, and I hurt a lot of people. But I went to prison. What happened to the people? What kind of help did they get? How are we creating a bridge between the person that has harmed them? That doesn't exist. So my aim is to bring people together, to connect people, and create a process of healing rather than separating.
How do let's talk about that now.
Like how do we do that?
Okay, well, that's your goal. Are you doing that? What are you doing to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we developed an app where we can identify things. We can identify people's experience that is pretty much in the shadows. And we're elevating people's experience that are on parole.
Okay,
and
so that's Project Protocol, right?
That's Project Protocol.
Okay, Amanda will put a link up in a moment that people, if they want to check it out, they can. But can you describe a little bit more what the app is?
Yeah, so what the app aims to do is to bring transparency, you know, into the parole process. Usually when people come out of prison, they meet their parole agent, and their parole agent knows everything about this person from the moment they were arrested or from the moment that they had any type of interaction with law enforcement, all the way up until they're released. But when a person comes out, they know nothing about this person that they're gonna see. They know nothing about like what are the, you know, what is this person like? Who are they? Are they supportive? You know, do they provide, you know, what do they provide? So when I asked that question on social media, it was, that was it. That was like the main question, was like, hey, what do you guys think about this person? Because I had no idea.
Yeah.
So if I'm going through something, I know that 55,000 other people who are on parole in the state of California are going through the same thing.
As well as this particular parole officer, right?
Well, I mean, a lot of people had different experiences with this parole officer. There was a lot of positive experiences that came out. So now I'm just wondering, okay, what is it about me? So these are the questions that we're asking. And then if you want to get deeper into the questions, now let's ask the question, is it easier to just reincarcerate somebody that's difficult rather than give them services that they need?
So Marquita asks, is this available for probation as well, which is federal, or is this just parole currently?
So currently, this is parole in California.
Okay.
So there's 35 prisons in California, and there's people coming out, thousands of people coming out every day. We hope to model this and also cover probation, because probation is a huge population in California. And we want to model it in California, and we want to share it with the United States.
Okay. What is the reaction from, you know, the powers that be, supervised release, probation officers, departments of probation? What are they saying? I mean, excuse me, parole.
What do they say?
Yeah. Are they threatened by this?
Are they involved with it? Do they?
I don't know. It didn't dawn on me that I needed to ask their permission.
I'm not on probation no more. I'm not on parole no more.
Not on parole anymore. So no. So you know what? No. You know, the data is going to be available if they want to see what people think about them. It'll be available on the website as soon as we launch. You know, if people want to learn about themselves and the way people think about them, it'll be up there.
Yeah.
You know, we hope to come to a place where we see, hey, you know what? Our community-based organizations doing most of the work here. You know, why do we need a parole officer?
You made a good point. You mentioned healing, and you mentioned healing in the way of the person who perpetrated the crime and the victims of the crime, right? I have a friend named Shaka Senghor, who, when he was in prison, decided to write a letter. He actually was incarcerated for actually killing a man, and he decided to write a letter to his victim's family and ask for their forgiveness. Have you ever reconciled in your heart and your mind to do something like that? Or have you done something like that? Or what do you even think about that? Because that was the way that he chose to find healing for himself and kind of close that gap that you were speaking of.
Yeah. I've written dozens of letters. I got notebooks of a journal that I kept from 2004 up until like 2015. But I'm not allowed to speak to the family. When I got out on parole, they told me that I should not even have anything with their name on it.
Right.
So this is the dividing line that we're talking about, is that keeping people separated and not having an avenue for healing, you know, will only create like division, will create hate, create resentment. So right. there is no mechanism for restorative justice.
No. Let me address one thing and then ask you a question too. So you mentioned like bringing people together, right? And bringing community together, and you know, we got to figure out a way to get to integrate our apps. So we'll talk about that offline for sure, because I think there's some great opportunity, and that's what Commissary Club is about as well, as bringing people together, right? And there's I mean, I don't know, there's probably hundreds of different needs in different phases of reentry, right? And like, you know, you're handling like I love the app, you know, I think the need is there. I think bringing transparency to the probation, you know, process, and keeping an accountability on both sides, right? Is what I think comes out of that. I mean, I think I had like 8 different probation officers. I don't know why. I don't know why. It was just like, I was just going, okay, then they'd be like, meet your new probation officer, like every couple months. I'm like, all right, hey, like, you know, one thing that I did, and then I'll ask the question is I made sure that I showed up in their office more times than I was asked until they got to the point, where they're like, Seth, don't come in here unless we call you. You got it. No problem. And now I'm on a different set of orders, right? But it was like, I'm showing up. I'm like, am everything all right? What do you need from me? Do you need me to do this? Do you need me to do that? And like, why are you here? Do we have an appointment?
Give yourself urines.
Yeah.
Very needy.
So Richard said something at the beginning of the show. He said that he had a very good probation officer because he hardly came around. You know, and a lot of people think that. It's like, yeah, my probation or parole officer is good because I hardly see him.
Yeah.
But if you hardly see them, like, what kind of services are you getting that you're not that you should be getting?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
I think the approach.
And then if you violate, then what happens? They're going to be like, well, we never saw Richard.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that creates a different problem. And now it's having to defend yourself from a person that has authority versus a person that's coming out of incarceration. And, you know, that's a really huge hurdle to overcome.
Lopsided, for sure.
So you're also involved with GRIP. And I was not familiar with that program, but they have a 1-year sort of restorative justice program that sounds like it's exactly, you know, what you're describing as there being a lack of. So I guess you gravitated because you think to it because it's serving a need. Could you describe to us what that's all about? And if Amanda could put up a link to GRIP.
Yeah, it's the griptraininginstitute.org.
The GRIP
and
training.
Yeah, what they do is they provide a trauma-informed healing and accountability program inside institutions. I went through that program, like I said earlier. And that's how I was able to really understand and get to the root of the trauma. So you're there for 52 weeks going through a variety of exercises of recounting like who your ancestors are, who like where do you come from? So it really creates a human aspect to this where you can really understand like who is this person? Because, you know, we say that nobody, like, you can't better yourself. You just have to tap into your authentic self because you're already good. You know, you're not bad. Like people are not born with with a pistol or with thoughts with homicidal thoughts. You know, there's something that happens, and identifying what happens will bring you to that understanding of the road that led to getting a life sentence.
Yep. So that's very emotional. That's very insightful. That's very energetic. That's a lot of things, right? But that's very different than developing the app, right? Like, did you like it seems like there's two kind of sides that are happening there, which is very interesting. And we could talk probably a lot about that too. But I want to ask you this specifically about coding. Did you learn to code or do any of that stuff inside prison at all? Did you get into that while you were down?
No, look, I've always liked technology. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard before I went inside. And,
gotcha.
And when I came out, I went to the coding boot camp, Savio.
Yeah, at Reboot LA.
Yeah, to Reboot LA. And I wasn't the best coder. As a matter of fact, I couldn't get a job afterwards. It was so difficult. So I went to work for the entertainment industry. But my buddy who's not here with me, Memo, he was good and he would catch on quick. and we still were not able to get jobs. So we started a company called Future Work, where we just wanted to, we figured that if we started a company, they would be hiring the company instead of Emiliano and Guillermo, formerly incarcerated folks with a criminal record. That was the thinking. Worked for a little while, and then the challenges started to pop up. You know, when I got this new parole officer who inspired the app, and when I started asking questions, then I went to Memo, and I drew him the idea, and he started to put it together. And then I started talking to people, and everywhere I went, I started talking to folks. And then I was in San Francisco in 2020, and I met a person who's now a good friend, who introduced me to other folks. And during the pandemic, we all got together, and were able to bring life to this app. And this is a labor of love from a lot of different people going through very different things throughout California.
No, it's great, man. And you're talking about the entrepreneurial journey now, right? Like that's the whole, all right, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? How do we build something that people want? How do we, like get and make an impact? How do we fund it? How do we do all these things, right? And there's a lot of people that have criminal records that get out of prison that either through force, right, by not being able to get a job elsewhere, right, are forced to start being entrepreneurial. But there's also a lot of people, I think, that go through the criminal justice system who are just entrepreneurs, just had different products, or had the drive, just needed the direction, type of thing too. And it sounds like that's what you're doing right now. So it's great stuff.
Yeah, I think that prisons and jails throughout the country have the most innovative minds in there, because they lack the resources that people out here have, and still are able to make things happen.
Yeah.
That's an excellent time for us to wrap things up here. I completely agree that there is vast talent, musical talent, entrepreneurial talent, business talent, artistic talent, on and on. And it's just a question of, looking and finding it, because it is there. We want to really thank you, Emiliano, for opening your heart and sharing your journey. And when are you launching your app? Do you have a?
We're currently going through user testing right now. So what we did is, we're reaching out to folks who are on active parole and having them use the app and see what feels natural to them, learn from that, and then tweak it and hopefully launch soon.
Let's connect and offline, and we'll help you out with that for sure.
Thank everybody, for coming. We saw a lot of new faces here, and obviously a bunch who were not familiar with what we do, because we sort of do every week. And it could just be that some people like what we do every week and some people just don't. And, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. Listening to some of the comments people made, what I would love, I want to give everybody my email address, which is richard@commissary.club.
No. Just tell them to go to the app. Go download commissary.club. Go on the app. Richard's on there. You can post your thoughts. You can ping him directly. You can do all that. Like no email. You get direct.
You want to get Emilio on it. You want to get him on it to Emiliano.
And I just finished my sentence here. But I wish everybody would please tell me what you think, and tell me what we're doing wrong if you think there's wrong. Hopefully there's something you'll like that you'll want to share, and how we can improve. We don't begin to think we have all the answers, that's for sure. I don't know if anybody does. All I can tell you is we are desperately desirous to find the answers, because we really feel responsibility to our 70 million brothers and sisters with records. And that's, I can speak for Seth and Amanda and Divine and Adrian and the rest of our team. That is our life's work. So if you have an idea of how we can do it better, or what you'd like to see on the yard and what you don't, please do let me know personally. It would mean a lot to me to hear from you. Ultimately, as we always say, we've got to look after each other. That's one theme that we see every week on the yard. Folks who've done time, went through this terrible experience, and rather than turn their back on the community, come right back to the community and try to do the right thing and help their brothers and sisters have a better, more successful reentry and have more opportunities and more chances for success. And I think that's just speaks volumes about this population. So thank you all for joining us. We'll be back here next week, and I'm sure we'll do things that'll piss off somebody along the way. I hope we do, because it means we're being honest, and honesty sometimes, you know, pisses people off, but we really appreciate everybody being part of this. Please stay safe. And I'm going to just tell you, get inoculated, get vaccinated. You know, I've seen how this thing can go south. Personally, I've seen it, and you don't want to go through it. So everybody, have a good evening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Emiliano.
Emiliano,
Oh,
thank you.
thank you.